interview conducted at the Cherry Hill Inn in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, at the reunion of A Company, 7th Armored Infantry Battalion. So, what I'm interested in first is sort of how you got into the military. More of an eye on this than I usually do. I've got another one here in case it doesn't. So you're from New York?
I was from New York City, Flushing at that time when the war broke out. And I had just finished 3 years in high school. The military services had always appealed to me, and I had been very interested in going into the Navy or the Naval Academy. In 1941, when the war broke out, I had just finished 3 years of high school. And I wasn't old enough to enlist at the time. And I continued on in high school, but the thing was, at least in our locality, everyone was just going off to the service as soon as they became old enough. And those who were a little older, large number enlisted right at the outbreak. I still had interest in going in the Navy and trying for one of the service academies if I could. Unfortunately, I took the exams for the Navy V-12 program. I did pass them, but I couldn't pass the color perception test that they gave. So I continued on in school. And actually, I finished high school and a year of prep school before I was 18. While I was still 17, I enlisted in the reserves in the Army. Since I didn't figure there would be much opportunity in the Navy. And in September of 1943, I was called active duty in the reserves. Started out in Fort Dix and went through a battery of classifications, and next thing I knew, I found myself on orders to Fort Benning, Georgia. The infantry school was located. I arrived there and was in the 4th Training Regiment, 9th Company, I believe. And to my surprise, I found we were going through infantry training, and we were destined to go into a program, the Army Specialist Training Program at that time, ASTP. Most of the people that joined us at that time, and there's a few of the fellows in the company, Arnold Moe, Wheeler, name a few that were Cash and just think of the name right now. We're all in the same outfit, trained together. The training cadre there were a sprinkling of some real old regulars, and there were a few who had dropped out of OCS at some time. And we trained as basic riflemen. Years later, and looking back at that training and comparing with the training I was seeing then, I realized that really we had excellent training as riflemen. We weren't being trained to be specialists or anything else, but I'd say good, competent riflemen capable of fitting in any place. We trained for 4 months at Benning, which was a little longer than the normal basic training, and proceeded then in January of 44 to University of Illinois. And we were thrown into a crash program, supposedly become engineers in about 2 years with a degree. Our stay there only lasted about 6 weeks. And at that time, D-Day was on the horizon, and they needed an infantryman. So one cold morning, we were told to saddle up. We were in Class A uniform with our 2 barracks bags in those days. Boarded some trains and headed off somewhere. We were going south. We knew that. We got down into Louisiana, and it was getting dark. And as in most cases, troop trains, they shuttled here and there and stopped and started again. Noticed looking out the window that as we crossed some railroad crossings, road crossings. There were Army units set up in positions. Finally, the train stopped, and Chaplain Vaughn MacArthur was the division chaplain, came aboard and welcomed us to the 8th Armored Division.
How large a group were you with?
I'd say probably there were 3 carloads of us. So, maybe 150, 200.
Good sized group.
It was a good sized group that came down. Most all the people I've been with at Benning were with us. There was then people that had trained in other areas. Some of them not even infantry. They were other branches. We pulled into a siding finally. We walked out. We were, it was raining, deep in the woods, dark. We were in Class A uniform. And we went through a line of NCOs with flashlights, and they threw us a shell and a half and a couple of blankets and just told us to bed down for the night. And that was our welcome to the 8th Armored Division. The next morning, it cleared up some. We fed in the field kitchen and proceeded to be routed through, some personnel people and assigned to units. And I was assigned to A Company, the 7th Armored Infantry. Then we proceeded to gather up our belongings and move into little areas where all the people destined for the 7th was. The first officer I met there, who later was our CO in Europe, was Captain Joe Finley. And he was standing, raincoat over his shoulders, raining again, reading the New York Times, and as fast as he turned the pages, they'd get wet. And he just didn't seem to bother him a bit. He'd just keep turning. Well, we stayed about 2 or 3 days there, and we found the division was the tail end of Louisiana maneuvers. And the division was supposed to go someplace. They'd been in the field since, I think, about November of 1943.
Probably getting a little weary of it.
And we found out, there were all kinds of rumors, but I guess the one I can pin down the best, that we were supposed to go to some camp in Texas, but the division that was there hadn't moved out, and there wasn't a camp for us. So we were taken over, and there was the 7th out in the bivouac area in a big flat plain in the middle of Louisiana, close to Camp Polk. And we stayed out there for about 6 weeks in pub tents. Our introduction to the company had been together quite a while. They had people in and out as replacements, but basic cadre were there. Some of them were old timers. Some of them had been 2 years in. Some had some prior experience. They appeared to be, we were outsiders. And in an outfit that had been together a long time, getting accepted was, you were still one of the newcomers for 6 months or so. But we were taken in and billeted down. I was assigned to the 2nd Platoon in the headquarters squad in an Armored Infantry battalion, and I eventually started as a scout. Pappy Beers, Bob Beers was our sergeant, and Lieutenant Hammerschmidt was our platoon leader. And Captain Cook was the company commander then, and Charlie Cook. And I do remember his calling us together and telling us how he thought he had a pretty good outfit, pretty good NCOs, and we thought we were better than any of them. Show it. Maybe make some changes. But we were kept separate. We were drilled separate and trained separate for about 2 weeks, in addition to catching all the dirty details. And on little over from us were the people that were leaving the outfit, and they were destined to, I think, some to the CBI theater and probably European theater. But the training was done by all the old sergeants until we could convince them, and we thought we were pretty good trained riflemen, and I believe we were. And it didn't take long that we got out of what would be the basic training type stuff, just a few days, and then they took us around and showed us and instructed us on the use of all the weapons in an armed infantry battalion, which were something that we hadn't been trained on. Because we were trained as riflemen. That continued. We just lived a normal routine out there. We pulled our work details and training wasn't very strenuous then. Most people were just trying to maintain maintenance work, getting the equipment back in shape after 3 or 4 months in the field. People were going off on leave because they hadn't had leaves for quite a while. And eventually we moved into South Camp Polk in the barracks. And we then started a regular routine of training. The training was pretty good. Again, looking at it, especially from later years, it was probably equal to or maybe a little better than the average training that was going on. I think that, and like in any place, there's always a shortage of training areas. And every area wouldn't be the best suited for your particular type of training, but that had to be spread along the whole division, so it wasn't always optimum. But it was good. We did a lot of live exercises, a lot of live firing. Very realistic. We fired at much closer ranges, supporting fire than we were ever allowed 2 years later. Overhead fire was very close. Our officers were right there all the time with us in training, and the NCOs. A Company was a little wild.
I've heard that from a number of people.
They did a lot of things that probably, what I know today would be frowned on very much. But at that time, we were considered a little wild, but we were also always given about every dirty job or important job that ever came up. We had change of command about that time, and Captain Finley came over and took the company and replaced Captain Cook, who went up to battalion headquarters. Colonel Poinier was our battalion commander at that time. So our training was rigorous, and I'd always remembered while I was training at Benning as an infantryman, because we walked and walked and walked every day. Riding was pure luxury. And I think it was the 7th Armored Division had come in from the desert, and they were in an area near us at Fort Wayne. And we'd see them rolling out every day, and there was their Armored Infantry outfits rolling along in half-decks. We'd be slogging along, and of course they'd be splashing mud up on us and tearing the road up. Well, wishing, it could be something like that. Well, soon found out that we were an Armored Infantry outfit. But then we did an awful lot of walking. 25-mile marches, 10-mile marches were frequent. Most of them were speed marches, although they weren't intended to be. But, it'd be nothing to walk men from the training all week, to pull out on Friday night, march back to camp on foot. Tracks would go back some other way. And it may be 10, 15, 20 miles, maybe a little longer. And get in Saturday morning, and we'd have to manicure the half tracks and clean everything up before we ever got free, and sometime Saturday afternoon. Generally, it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of good people. So I was still with the bunch that I had trained with, and gradually we were being accepted into the organization. And there were, people who were, I think, very influential in bring them along. And Pappy Beers, I say Pappy Beers had as much say in what went on in the company as any officer in the company had. But if Pappy said it, that was it. Old Bill Crocker was one of the platoon sergeants, Dick Peters. And, and they were all, we were still the new kids on the block, but they really, took pains to see in the training that, we got a good break, moved people along as they saw that they deserved it. And we trained hard at that time. And it was, say, 6 days a week, just about. There wasn't many places to go at Camp Polk. Leesville wasn't much of a town.
Bill Bob just told me that Leesville also had, they read in Time magazine that had the highest syphilis rate in the country.
It was, I contrasted to, or compare it like to some of these western towns you see in the movie. It had one paved street that I remember, boardwalks, sidewalks, and swing door saloons. It wasn't much, but whenever we could afford it on our pay, we headed up to Shreveport if we could get some ride. Usually get back in time for reveille Monday morning, and off we'd go to the field again. Overall, I think the training was real good. It was realistic. It was hard. And the people worked together real well. It was a close-knit group, and we were the newcomers, even just trying to break in. And once you were accepted, we had some others come in after us. They cut back on the Air Cadet program, so we had some replacements from Air Cadets. And D-Day came, and training heightened. Became more intense. We went through a series of exercises. And of course, rumors were flying. And gosh, I can remember a rumor probably had us in every part of the world at some point in time. And it was all from good sources. Personally knew that he'd seen this or seen that. But then as the summer wore on, things kept heating up, and we realized, that we were pretty well sure of going out soon. We had some inspections from the Army Field Forces that day. It's General Uhu Lear. And we got by his. Well, for some reason, they picked units all through the division that General Lear would inspect. And fates be what it was, they selected A Company. And I know the company commander, the battalion commander, and several others all went up to try to get it changed. Any company but A Company. But they didn't. So we worked for about a week, rehearsing, preparing for the particular type of inspections that we were going to go through. Cleaned up everything we could. And I remember the night before, this was September, October 1944. A bunch of promotions came through. Some of us to PFC, a couple of sergeants. And, he hardly even had time to try to sew any stripes on. And those that did, weren't always in the best shape to do. Anyhow, we went through the inspection the next day. We got by General Lear all right, but General Colson, or Colonel Colson, boy, he tore into us. He was our own combat commander. So we had a bunch of people busted. Some who had been promoted the night before. Bill Magooter, I remember, had made sergeant and was back as private again the next morning. Pappy Beers got busted. Because getting busted didn't mean that much then, because company commander could almost promote you back at least a couple of grades the next day if you wanted. Old Captain Finley, that didn't phase him a bit. He was still all for the company. But we were finally ready to go overseas and went through all the normal preparations. I think we were ready. The unit had worked well together. There was a real strong bond within the people. We had a lot of depth in the unit. By that time, I'd shifted over from Pappy's squad as a scout to the mortar squad in the platoon. Armored Infantry units were organized a little different than the standard infantry battalion. We had a headquarters squad, 2 rifle squads, a machine gun squad, and a mortar squad in each platoon. And of course, we had our track.
Gives you a fair amount of firepower.
We had a lot of firepower when we were mounted with our equipment. We were dismounted, we went better than anybody else. But I shifted over to mortars about that time under Sergeant Grove. And in those days, even though you might have been exposed or trained with a mortar, which didn't happen to be. But you worked up through the positions, ammunition handler, and assistant gunner and gunner. But everybody had to be a qualified gunner. So even though you were an ammunition handler, you were a qualified gunner. And so we trained daily, regularly. It was intensive. So we delivered close-in fire support, overhead fire, which years later they didn't even allow in the service. We did it as a matter of routine, mortars. And in depth, everyone in our squad was a gunner, qualified as a gunner. On the TO&E, you were just an ammunition handler. And in the rifle squads, we had, I'd say, squad leader capabilities 2, 3, and 4 deep. But it was just routine. No one ever anticipated or figured, which casualties would be. But the state of training was such, and the caliber of the people. I can remember a few deadbeats we had, but probably they were a handful in the company. Most of the others, we were all 18 to 22, 23. Average education is high school probably, but they were all conscientious, hardworking people. They all had worked. The old outfit, a good part of them were Pennsylvania coal miners in Philadelphia area and then coal miners. They'd worked hard, and there was a lot of native ingenuity. If equipment broke down, we fixed it, kept it rolling, improvised a lot, but everything was done, and the people worked together real well. It was, they talk about esprit de corps in the Army, and that's something that it's like a person or a personality. And every unit is different. And when you say a company or a battalion, it just doesn't mean X number of people and X number of weapons of this type and Y number of this type, but you put it together, and that gives the physical form, but the spirit of it comes from the people and the heart of it. We had a good esprit de corps. There was a lot of pride in a company, but also there was high degree of loyalty to each other, and we'd fight like hell among ourselves. If someone in the second platoon said something to the third platoon, they were all masked to fight. Or if someone from B company said something against A company was a solid block. Even in the battalion. Something I always remember, we said, well, A company. Everybody knew A company. We were also Captain Finley's company. And that meant the same thing. As identification, and we identified strongly with the unit. Finally, we pulled out of Camp Polk and headed for Camp Kilmer, New Jersey to take off. And then were troop sleepers, which were great for moving troops. We traveled in Pullmans and day coaches on other moves. But it was one of the best things the Army did in troop sleepers for moving troops around the country by train. They were really great.
What were they like? I'm not familiar.
It was probably just like a big, standard rail car. All right, but instead of having rows of seats down both sides, or if it was a Pullman, having your bunks to fold down, on starting, say, at one end of the train, you'd have the whole right side, except for a passageway, with a big long bench facing each other, two of them that I think would seat about 4 people. Right. Then you had folding down cots 4 high. Those people could sleep, and there was room for your equipment. Then you'd move down, it would be on the other side, and kept reversing. So really it was fairly comfortable, and on a long trip, you could have the 2 upper bunks down all the time. People could sleep if they wanted or whatever they wanted to do. A place for equipment storage. And actually, they were more comfortable traveling than a Pullman or something else. And they call them troop sleepers in those days. We had a kitchen car someplace, and they came through and fed us our meals, and we drifted up to Camp Kilmer. There, we got a couple of passes waiting to go, and fortunately, I lived in New York at the time. My parents did, and I was able to go home. I had a hard time finding my way back to Camp Kilmer at night in the fog. And of course, everything was blacked out. And you just walked from barracks to barracks and try to look at the number on the door, because you could barely see a barracks in the fog, much less anything else. Then one day we were loaded up and marched down and boarded His Majesty's ship Samaria for our trip across. Samaria was a unique experience for U.S. troops and troop ships. It was a British ship. We went on board and we were down F deck, number 1 and number 2 hold. So we were pretty far down and up forward. Unlike an American troop ship, when we went aboard and we carried all our gear. Now, the soldier then did not have as much as his kids have today. Radios and things, they were unknown. So we just had the one duffel bag. Then we had boxes or wooden boxes, had stenciled on them what was in them, and they had also a designation TAT, which meant to accompany troops. And we all had a share carrying that equipment aboard. As we went up the gangplank, we were handed a hammock, and a guide leading us down into the bowels of the ship where we would spend the next 14 days, except for little excursions on deck when we could. Unlike American transport, there was no such thing as a galley or a mess home. The galley, I remember finding, was a little corner of about C deck or B deck. There was some, I guess, stone or foundations where they had cooking stoves on, a couple of stoves. Hardly any more than we'd have for the company. Now, they may have had other galleys, spaced through the ship, but I don't know, because we never got past the one area. And they had 2 or 3 individuals there, the crew, part of the crew. Boy, they were really crummy looking people. In fact, they condemned it the second day out. We put our own people in. But they would have, in later years, we used to call a food service supervisor. They'd give them nightmares just to look. They fed us twice a day. We drew a pound ration of bread a day. Purser would come down in the morning and issue us our pound of bread. We had fresh water down the hold 1 hour a day. Everything else was salt water. And twice a day at the side of the ship, the outer skin of the ship, there were some tables coming out from the side in this big square hold. And they had the folding type seats that folded in and out. At the head of each table, I still remember, was a nice polished wood cabinet. At the head of each table. Inside of the cabinet, there were 3 or 4 buckets and a teapot. And the tables could seat 10 or 12 people. And that was a mess. And if you're familiar with British military, right, a mess has a significant meaning.
Right.
Someone from your mess, one man took the buckets and the teapot twice a day when we were fed, sometime in early to mid-morning, and the next time was late in the day. He would take the buckets and the teapot up to C or B deck and draw the rations for our little mess, and proceed to bring them back down through the ladders, and there we were fed. The food was pretty bad. We'd heard via the grapevine, and this never did account for, that being a British transport, they'd pick up rations at both ends. Well, the rations that they'd pick up at U.S. end, they always saved back to England, because food wasn't that great there, and the food we were getting wasn't always the best. And good many of us were seasick. And some of that slop that came down, floating around in those buckets was, not the greatest. We ate out of our mess gear and still down in the same hold where we lived and slept. And we had some slop buckets there. You emptied what was left and tried to scrub out your mess gear the best you could. Some people were sick a good part of the time, so the odor down there was not the best. Shower facilities, there weren't any. Now, we did discover up in officers' country where the officers' staterooms were in the ship's room. There was a saltwater shower up there. So what we do is sometime at night, after say 10, 11 o'clock at night, we'd sneak up there and put someone to watch and sneak in and take a saltwater shower. Because that didn't leave you much better either than fresh water. We also had some of our units that were up manned the guns on the ship. We had a 20-pounder or something like that on the back deck. And that was a Royal Navy gun crew. But the anti-tank guns that they had, anti-aircraft guns out of board ship, some of our units manned. And since they were manned 24 hours a day, they got a meal at midnight when they come off. Well, sandwiches or something else. Also, from the other units from where we worked down the hole, they would draw details to clean decks at night. And you got fed it from one of the galleys, one of the officers' galleys. And you get a sandwich or something, and people look forward to working, at night because the food was so bad. And if you had a good NCO with you, when he'd report to the galley and the cook, and every time that cook turned his back, anything that was handy was just thrown out the door. Yeah. But we all survived it. I remember one funny incident. This was a British transport. And like the British system, the sergeants have a separate mess from the other ranks. And they had a nicely marked room, which was the sergeant's mess. And it was up a couple of decks, which we were using as a movie theater. So the irony of it, we went up there one time to see the picture, and the only picture was the mutiny on the bounty. And of course, we went through the normal routine of getting shots aboard ship, and there'd be big long lines. And you might think you're on the line for one thing, and you end up in the line for something else and never know it. But eventually, we arrived at Southampton. I think it was Southampton. I don't remember. That was the one we pulled out from. I don't know. And in England, we were picked up in trucks and hauled off to Penning's Camp near Tidworth in England. Tidworth was an old British Army garrison, big old stone barracks, very impressive, cold and drafty as hell too. We were outside in part of the division was in there. 7th was out on the Penning's Camp. There was a hill 2 or 3 miles out of Tidworth, tent camp. And we just out there. Sea ration never tasted so good. We got the first meal after that doggone ship. We trained some more in England while we were waiting. Mostly close cooperation, working with our tank. We drew all our vehicles and equipment.
And a few extras from what I heard.
Anything extra that we could lay our hands on. And again, it was, the company would do anything, and even our officers, I think, Captain Finley would back the guys, and he thought it'd be hilarious sometimes when they get in trouble. So what? Really, the only, I remember one bad officer in the battalion, which was the guy in exec. Even the other officers didn't get. He was kind of an SOB. But we stayed in England, and I did get a pass to Paris, not Paris, London, and a couple of others with different places. I had some relatives over there, and I always hoped to visit, but unfortunately, I picked up pneumonia at the tent camp, and I ended up in the hospital in Tidworth, big old barracks. And so I missed out the opportunity by the time I got out of the hospital, we were getting ready to shove off to France. We hit into France. I think we went across on a small transport.
Let me break in for just a second.
Sure.
You were defining, as an enlisted man, you were defining good officers and bad officers in the battalion. You only had one bad officer.
Well,
what was your criteria for, at that point, for?
Well, I guess part of the criteria was just how he treated the people. Professionally, if you're looking at it that way, we had some officers who were probably they weren't the most proficient and professionally qualified. In fact, we probably had sergeants who were better qualified. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, they treated the people decently. Say Lieutenant Hammerschmidt, our platoon leader, was a great guy. He was young, he was gung-ho, and he worked as hard. But you always could feel you got a fair deal from Lieutenant Hammerschmidt. And for the most part, our other officers, they would try to do things for me. I remember we were still at South Camp. As I mentioned earlier, I had wanted to go to one of the service academies. And after I enlisted in the Army, I tried to, I said I'd try for an enlisted appointment. So I put in, and in those days, the company clerk had all your records. He made the payroll. He knew everything about everybody. It was a very personal rather than an impersonal relationship. And even with our officers, they knew the people. I had put in, and for some reason, the paperwork got screwed up. And I had to take then what they call the IQ examination again, because I didn't have enough points at that time to qualify. So I retook the examination and got the necessary score. But say the paperwork got screwed up. Well, a lot of places that be it. But I don't remember Captain Finley called me and apologized for it. Even Colonel Poinier called me after the battalion, and apologized for, we screwed it up. He said, "Do you want to go to OCS?" I said, "No." Very fine. And back to the company. They'd catch you goofing off. Well, depending what you were doing. I can remember being down in the barbershop getting a haircut. Who walked in? Lieutenant Hammerschmidt. Well, he knew we were working hard. He knew we had to get haircuts, even though we were supposed to be someplace. Well, they'd overlook some things like that. If you did something bad or wrong, they took the appropriate disciplinary action. But, they were straight and fair. You could talk to them, all except one. Now, we had some that they were good Joes. They were nice guys. Probably professionally, they weren't worth a damn. But they tried. And I say fortunately, they were well backed up by some good NCOs. Some were very, wouldn't call them very impressive in their manner. But they were very, very competent, very dedicated, and would try real hard. Lieutenant Volk was one. They're really dedicated people, and they were always there. Sure, they partied and had a lot of things we didn't have, but I don't think anyone even, when I knew that would always cuss the officer out with Bob Myers. He hated everything about the Army. Even he'd go out in a PX and buy a candy bar rather than eat in a company mess hall because it came from the Army. But surprisingly enough, Bob was a terrific driver. And just to jump ahead, I can remember one time he come under fire and tried to back the tracks out to get out of the artillery. I'm not sure if my driver or Al Metcalf bumped into Bob's track back and put a little dent in the fender. There's the artillery coming out, and Bob's out there raising hell because someone put a dent in his fender. And he worked hard, but he hated the Army. He hated it. I don't ever remember hearing him say a good word about it in the whole time I served with him. But, you know, a little dent in his fender, and that was it. But anyhow, I think we had a good bunch of officers. And we had a good bunch of NCOs. Mentioned Happy Beers, Dick Peters, Bill Crocker. You couldn't beat him. Snake Canfield was our first sergeant. He was mean. But even, I remember I got a week of hard labor one time, but I wasn't about to ask why, because I figured I'd get another week. But Snake did a good job, and he was right up. Our first sergeants were always up front. In fact, in the unit, the officers and NCOs were first. When we went in action, any place else. That's why we lost so many.
I was going to say, from the casualty list, you can see that.
I say even, we liked them, even though that, I say Snake was hard. A.B. Stegman, our supply sergeant, you know, probably like any other supply sergeant, he thought every piece item that he gave you, he owned. But he was there doing his job, and he did it well. So overall, you know, I'd say the officers, I think the officers and the people were, at that point, well qualified. We had in-depth, and I say there was a strong feeling of, we had a lot of pride in our unit and loyalty to the people within the unit. So we formed a lot of friendships.
When you went across the channel going over to France, did you at that point anticipate going into combat, or were you going to be doing occupation?
We thought we were going into combat because this was at the time of the Bulge. They were kind of the tail end of the Bulge. The main thrust had been contained by Christmas, and we were going right after that. So we knew we were going into combat. We landed in France. The weather had been pretty good. Of course, it's always cold and damp in England. We landed in France. It seemed pretty nice. And we were billeted in the chateau, the whole company, waiting for our vehicles to catch up with us. And we had a good time there. I could speak some French from high school. There's another guy, Pop Bevillard, in the platoon. Had French background someplace. He was older, probably Bill Bob's age, or maybe in his 30s. So he was older than most, but that's why Pop Bevillard. But we could speak French, or rudiments of French. We made out like bandits because we were interpreting for all the other people to get in Calvados and other drinks. Of course, the tavern keepers, they were glad to have us, and they were feeding us, so we'd keep talking, so the other people would keep buying things. But we spent about 3 or 4 days there till we, all the equipment caught up with us. Had come over in LSTs. And then we pulled up to move up to the front. Well, the morning we moved out, we got caught in a blizzard. And at that time, you had the roads that were dedicated to convoys moving one direction. If you weren't in one, you didn't get on the road. We weren't on the road very long, and our squad leader that night, I was up in the turret, the track, mainly because our squad leader, Vernon Grove, had fallen into a tree the night before. And he was a little ripe, and we had him out in the back end of the track. It was colder than the devil, snowing. We didn't get too far, and we burned a bogey out. Now, I don't know if you know what a bogey wheel is.
Well, go ahead. I do, but go ahead from the tape.
Bogey wheel is part of the track suspension. And the American Army was the only, it was in your armored, in the development of armored vehicles, there were really 2 types of suspensions. One was a Christie, that I remember, I think, and the other was this bogey wheel. Most of the other armies adopted the Christie type suspension, which I think we kind of even now have, actually. The bogey wheel suspension was a little bit different, and these doggone bogies you'd have to grease each one. There was a number of them along that guided the track. And they would have happened if you didn't get enough grease in them, they would burn out. And we burn out a bogey. We hadn't been out very long, and with the snow and that, you couldn't get in the grease, and it was so damn cold. The grease was freezing up on us, and the nipples that you pumped the grease in through were clogged and frozen. So we had to pull out a line. Fortunately, it was right by a cafe. The outfit come up and the maintenance, we were just told to pull off and wait for the company maintenance. Well, Sergeant Blasco and his people got up at the tail end of the battalion. Our company maintenance couldn't do anything. We were going to wait for them. They'd fix it. Well, we stayed in the cafe until they come. Fortunately, they made coffee royale, cognac, keep us warm. And, battalion maintenance came up and they said they couldn't fix it. For us to haul it, go back to the 130th Ordnance was still back in the rear. It hadn't moved yet. It's still snowing like the devil. We got back to our squad. We bundled up in the track and we got back to 130th. Yeah, they'd fix it. We had to wait a while. And it took a couple hours. And someplace along the line, someone came up and said, "We got a message for you guys to go back to your old bivouac area. That's where they've assembled again." Well, we drove that night through meandering roads because we couldn't get on the main roads. We got back to the chateau and it was just deserted, just the way we'd left it that morning. So this was late at night. We pulled the track in under cover of a carriage house or something. And went in, the chateau was deserted, stripped clean. We just slept on the floor there. Next morning, went back to Ordnance, trying to find out where the hell the message came from. We didn't know. They said, no one knew there. But they said, "You want to go?" dragon wagon, but what they were, they had a big armored carrier with a big long flatbed on the back, and you could haul a tank on it, a tank retriever, all right? These at that time, in those days, were armored, and it had a two-man crew sitting up forward, the engine and driving control, and it was in the cab, and then two men in the back, space one, and then a ring mount turret for a 50 caliber machine gun. Well, the ordnance boys were going up in a convoy, but they didn't have any gunners. They just had the two-men crews. And rather than riding the back end of that half-track, it was colder than hell and snowy. Sergeant Grobo okayed it. Some of us wanted to ride as gunners in the convoy. Well, we did, and we just took our seat cushions. I'll digress here a minute. In the Armored Infantry, we didn't carry the standard infantry pack, which we started out with the old 1918 World War I type packs and roll. Then later another pack came in. We all carried what was called a reserve bag, or an officer's field bag. And this was just a canvas bag, and a strap, you could hook it over your shoulder. And your blankets, the armored half-tracks just had steel plates, but there was a canvas cover, and you could fold up one or two blankets and slide it in that cover, and you sat on those while you were riding. So we just took our seat cushions and our weapons, and we went. Well, the convoy moving up, with all the detours, getting lost, getting broke, we were gone for a week trying to catch the company, wandering all around France. And again, being unattached, you couldn't get rations anyplace. So you'd try to go for rations where you could from other places. Sometimes you could bum a meal from some mess. We pulled up into at night around Metz. I think it was around Metz. It was up in that area. You know, most of the time down the squad, we didn't know where we were going. We knew we were general direction. Sometimes we knew some of the bigger town names, but other than that, we didn't have to see a map even. So I think it was Metz, and there was a threat of some airborne coming in at that time. You know, there was threats all through the bulge of airdrops. So everything was real tight in this assembly area. Well, the regular crew of the Dragon wagon, they were going to sleep in the Dragon wagon. Well, that left no place for us. So I don't remember who I was with. I think I was with All Wyattney, but I'm not sure. We just took our seat cushions and went out and wandered around. And of course, we were being challenged every place we went. And we did find a bale of hay, or a bunch of hay. So we got the hay and put our blankets down, put the hay on top of us, slept the next morning. Gosh, the next morning, sun came up and we found there was our own track about 30 yards from where we were. We couldn't find it. Early that morning also, we located a truck from the company, or the battalion at least. It was going back. They knew where they were. So we then pulled up and joined up with the company. And we moved up then into this Luxembourg circuit. And there we were briefed on it. We were going to go in. And now from the division history, I learned a lot more of it later on. But I'm going to tell you as I saw it then, without knowing it. We were briefed. We were going in to relieve. We were going to make a sweep. And I don't even remember if they told us the names of the town.
Had the company been in action while you were away?
No.
Okay.
None. The division was just moving up. No one had been in action. And later on, I'll mention that, you know, in history it tells, we were being put in this area because they thought it was quiet and for some experience. Okay. We pulled in a circ and we were briefed. We were going to make a sweep. And they knew there were remnants of it, or part of a German armored division ahead. And what we were to do was with our combat command, which was the 18th Tank and 7th Armored Infantry, we were going to make a sweep, and we were leading A Company. And we were going to sweep all the way around behind them. And what we were told, that if anyone broke down, you left them. If you picked up survivors, you left the casualties. We were going to get behind them. And we went into what had been, I guess, a hotel or something. That's where we were going. Well, during the course of the night, and we were supposed to leave up the next morning, we had 2 or 3 alerts. And gradually the news filtered down that the 94th, which was ahead of us in line, was taking pretty heavy casualties on a push from, I don't remember the German Army division's name. And I guess it kept getting worse. So probably about the second or third time we got pulled out, we moved out and moved up to within probably 3 or 4 miles of Denny, where we would, the tracks hold up. We dismounted to move up on foot. Well, you know, the difference out of infantry and foot infantry, the foot infantryman, as he carries his home on his back, and he has everything with him, his blankets. And, normally, the way we were trained and operated, the track was our base. So when we dismounted, which was quite often, but it was only for a short period of time, and the only thing you carried was weapons and ammunition. You might stick a toothbrush in your pocket and a pair of socks. And that was
everything else.
Everything else was home,
yeah.
you know, and we had our extra rations and all. Well, we dismounted, loaded up, and we went in like a bunch of pack mules. So I was still in mortars that time. And I think between the mortar rounds and the 2.36s for our bazookas, I had something like 21 rounds. We had these front and back bags, and then I had them on both sides, in addition to our own weapons. And the machine gunners were loaded the same way, loaded down. We would just load. We didn't even have our overcoats. This was in the winter. We didn't have ARICs, just our boots, our ODs. We all had long underwear, of course, and our field jackets. And the field jackets then were the first issue of what similar pattern they have now, but no liners, no nothing. But it was so damn hot carrying all that stuff that, you know, you worked up a sweat. So we had about 3 or 4 miles maybe in a snow-covered road going into Denny, where we were supposed to be in 94. I guess that's the first time we come under fire, long-range artillery fire. And we didn't have any casualties that I know of. And one funny incident I do remember is we had this big Rex Voss from West Virginia. And of course, when the artillery come in, we just scattered off both sides of the road and hit the dirt. And I remember after I hit the dirt and looking up and I see Rex. He wasn't hard to miss, you know. He was big and easily picked up. And I said we knew most everybody anyhow. So, you know, you recognize one. Rex was standing in the middle of the road and he would hop from one side to the other. He's kind of uncertain as to which side to jump. But we got into Nenning just about, just getting light, daybreak, and relieved what was left in 94. And it wasn't many of them, and the stories we'd gotten that they committed a regiment piecemeal, battalion at a time, and they just got shot to hell. And they literally had just a handful of people left. And we started working our way up through the town. And I guess the first big, the town was pretty well clobbered at that point. Our the tank unit, the 18th tank, and the company was supposed to support us still wasn't up with us. So we were in there, it's just a company by itself. The first, just up the street, not too far, was a church. And of course, like all European churches, they had a steeple. And we had a hassle taking that. We lost quite a few people. And they had snipers up there. The whole village was pretty, you know, the German villages were built all of stone. And literally the little pillboxes all of themselves. And they were all around us. My platoon was, Hammerhead went up, or Lieutenant Hammerschmidt, and he was just raring to go. So I was with the mortars, so we were couple of houses back. And eventually through the day we cleared the whole town. We lost quite a few people. I know the second squad, which I later took over, George Potterberry had been killed. Heine Mueller had been hit. Several others had been hit. But by the end of the day, we'd worked our way all the way up to the end of town.
Were most of your casualties from sort of direct rifle
Small arms,
or, yeah,
small arms,
fire?
and plus some artillery.
Some artillery.
And there was some just concussion, close concussion. I can't tell you what the other platoons are doing because I don't remember seeing them. I remember hearing that, Dick Peters had been hit. Bill Crockett had been hit there. I don't remember. But I knew, we kept hearing them, and the mortars, we were just a little, maybe a house or two behind the rest of the platoon.
Were you using the mortars?
No, we'd been using small arms, our own small arms, but we just didn't have any good targets for the mortars at that point. So we still had our ammunition, and we got up toward what was the end of town, and the orders that came on toward night. Well, someone had told me we were going to pull back further. Well, no one ever got to us. And we were in a barn. Remember, the barn was burning. And the fire, they used straw and stuff in their construction. And so it was like burning in the stone and mortar was smoldering, and it was warm. And we hadn't eaten. We had no food. They brought us a sea ration one time, but it was frozen. I remember chipping beans off. Because beans were always the best thing that had in the sea ration in those days anyhow. Eat them anyway, hot, cold. But the outfit pulled back, but we didn't get the word somehow. And we were up there, and we decided that we'd go into a house that was next to it. Because, in Europe, the house and the barns are right one part of the other time. So I remember I was upstairs with someone, and we just kind of lay down on the bed. It seemed quiet. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't even know the rest of the outfit had pulled out till the Germans started coming again. The front door of the house was one of our boys had been killed earlier, one of the other platoons. And so the medics and the graduate station finally, they kind of propped him up in the door. And I think that's probably what saved us, because the tanks came through and the air infantry, and were sweeping the houses with machine gun fire. They never bothered ours. And there were only, just a squad of us, which was 8, 7, because we didn't have the driver with us. We figured we'd just as well keep quiet. So we stayed there, and they were dropping artillery in. It was just coming right over the roof, and it was tiled with primer down. We decided maybe it's better in the cellar. So that's when we went down to the basement, stayed. The next morning, one of the other platoons, I'm not sure, they pushed back up again, we came back out. I remember meeting Captain Finley on the way out. Where the hell have you guys been? Up collecting souvenirs? We told him, he said, okay, get back to you. Went back, and our platoon was up on a ridge. As we were going into town, it was to the right side of the town. And they'd been pinned down up there all night. We lost a lot of people up there with the frostbite, as well as the
machine gun squad was up there.
Mm-hmm. And I guess second or third squad, because I know Arnie Moe was up there. He got frozen feet up there. But we went up to they told us to get back, so we hauled our equipment up the hill. And Lieutenant Hammerschmidt said, well, I can't use you up here. And he said, you go on down, set up a fire position down below, and bring down some wire. So that's where we stayed the rest of that day. And eventually pulled back off there, and we did secure the town. And we kind of assembled, trying to reorganize what we had left. And I guess that was about the time that the tank B company was coming up through us. And the tank in the 18th back then, we'd cleared a bunch of mines, and they were stacked in an alleyway between the houses just off the street. One of our tanks back in the stack of mines. We lost a lot of people in B company, and that kind of shook them up at the start because they were just coming in to relieve us. Then we went on the next day to, it was Nenning, it was Berg, and it was Sins. It was a Schloss, I guess, or castle. We went to take that. And we got caught under some pretty heavy fire there. And we were using the mortar, and we finally just ran out of ammunition, and we didn't have any more left. You know, I mentioned about having people 3, 4 deep. I remember seeing Pappy Beers' squad from where we were looking over. I saw Pappy get hit. I saw Wilson Burke get hit. And Manny Gonzalez. And, you know, there was no Lieutenant Hammerschmidt, I guess. Captain Finley got hits. I guess Hammerhead was you know, no one had to give orders. You take over here, you take over there. It was just automatic. The people went up, and the next one, and either he'd been most senior or he decided that he was going to do it. They went, and they took it over. But finally, we hauled in a bunch of prisoners. And I'm not sure I got hit that day, earlier or later, but we were a troop of the 88th Cavalry. It was the next day. They were our recon unit. And I happened to know Jocko Mansfield, who I'd been in recruit training with, and he was with them. And they had a ground mounted 30 caliber, and they were moving out of position. They let them go around and wasn't looking, so I took a chunk out of my leg. And so I just went back after that to the aid station, and I got some. Doc Rowe, our dentist, gave me some APCs. The only thing that I got mad about is they tore up our little underwear. It got a little cool. And went back, and we pulled back in again to reorganize what was left. And by that time, we had even fewer people. And they established and consolidated Bird. And we'd drawn a lot of prisoners in, and the rest of the battalion had been committed, secured. I guess they secured all the areas around us in the tank battalion. And next thing I remember is as we just huddled wherever we could to get some sleep. I remember the kitchens coming up to feed us. We had no mess gear. We didn't carry it. And the first meal they fed us, I remember, was hotcakes. Well, we had our canteen cups, and we just went through with our hands, dirty and grimy as they were, and they put one hot cake on it, and someone would smear some jam or something on it, and then someone put another one on top of that. The next time they come up, they bought about 50 mess kits for the company. He said, there weren't that too many. But the next to last day, we were back, we pulled back into Nenning again, and counted noses. We formed 2 squads out of the platoon. One was a weapons squad combined the mortars and machine guns. And I don't remember who took that. And they gave me the riflemen that were left. I was still PFC. And we were told to get ready to move up to Sins that night and attack the next morning. Well, tried to round up all the people we could. There was only one that we couldn't. We found them later. Then they sent, Gizecki was our platoon sergeant. And I think Cameron Schmidt was running the company. They sent Leroy Carter, who was the anti-tank platoon, and we hadn't had a chance to use the anti-tank guns that much. So he'd come over the rifle squad with me.
The 57s at that point?
57, towed 57. And we moved up into Sins, and we could hear they attacked there, and we'd lost quite a bit that day. And pulled back, and sent us up. And we could hear the Germans moving in their mechanized equipment. We were supposed to attack like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And, you know, there's 5 or 6 of us, you know, in the rifles and machine guns. I don't know what the other platoons had, because I don't remember. But we dug in and waited. I don't know, half hour before we were supposed to jump off, we were relieved. the 94th came back to us and pulled back. Well, then we pulled back into netting and then pulled back to some town, I don't know where. And I guess that's the first time we really realized the extent of, you know, how many people we'd lost. But just the only one, I inherited the second squad, and it was myself and the driver, a half-track guy who had been up there snake. And most of the other squads in the platoon were the same, and the platoons of the company, except the anti-tank and mine. They hadn't been hit as hard. And of course, so we moved, and we got orders, I guess, to move into Holland. We didn't know where the heck we were going. We drove for 1 or 2 days, it seemed. And I didn't have a squad, just a driver myself, so we were hauling supplies in our track, kitchen gear, because the kitchen trucks were cooking on the move, and they didn't have room for everything. And we got up to Wilray, Holland, where we went into village. And I got a hold of the squad in the States. I got a corporal and 10 privates. They just come out of training. No, some of them had been in other units in England. And at that time, after the bulge, it was so short of infantry that they were all the anti-aircraft units and service units that were just scraping them out. So I had, 10 of them in a corporal rank. And we kind of rested, recuperated, and maintained in Wilray for a couple of weeks. 2, 3 weeks.
Tried to teach them some infantry tactics.
Try to give them a little bit of instruction, what we could. We didn't have much area. We were training in pillbox reduction at that time in the old Siegfried line. Mm-hmm. And that was chancy. I never figured out we could make it through if we had to take one. And we gotten finally, within action, our vehicles were the OD color. And sometime during the fighting in there, they whitewashed them to blend in with the snow. We got into Holland, the snow was melting, so we were trying to get the whitewash off them then. And, you don't have hoses or anything. We did back ours into a river, I think. We almost didn't get it out. Got it clean. And we moved up after we'd been there for a while. And of course, we lost most of our officers. Captain Finley was gone. I think Lieutenant Volk was gone. Hammerschmidt was still with us. And he had an acting company commander. I think Lieutenant Deal was still with us. We got a new lieutenant, Lieutenant Albanese, took the second platoon. The battalion, I think we only had 2 captains. The highest man, Captain Craddock, and someone else left. And they sent us a captain by name, I won't mention the name, but he wasn't very well liked by our remaining officers. And I'd always heard that later that Colonel Poinier, on back to the hospital, heard who was coming up. He raised hell and had him taken out. He didn't want him to have ACO. He was universally disliked. Mm-hmm. And we went on up, and a bunch of us were promoted. Bill Ween and myself, Strittenberger, some of us were promoted to staff sergeants and sergeants. Take over the new people. And we went into Holland. And I don't know the name of the town. I didn't know it then. We went into relieve the British 7th Armored Division. And it was almost comical, relieving them in a way. And they pulled through us at night. You know that we observed strict blackout. Gee, they come by on their Bren carriers and all equipment. I saw everything, 4-posted beds, big overstuffed chairs, and of course the inevitable teapot on the pintle ring of every vehicle. It was just there. And they'd had quite a rough time, I guess, getting that area. And they'd had even some pinned down for quite a period of time between town and the next one. It was all flat land. And the Germans would hold up. I can remember they had one real strong point in a factory. And we were observing in the town and watching our 155 shells, heavy artillery coming in, bouncing off the stone, just big stone wall. That's where Strittenberg got killed there. I'd been up in the OP. We could watch the air, and we knew there were snipers out there. We could see them. And I'd been up there for a while, and he came up to relieve me, take over, and I stepped out. My gosh, it wasn't a couple minutes, bang, they got me. And we pulled out up further that night, man positions, and it was quiet. And late in the day, or toward evening, or maybe it's just dark, dusk, we got relieved by our 88th Cavalry, which was our division recon unit, and pulled back to an assembly area. And we were fed. And the next morning, we took off again. And again, we didn't know where we were going. I guess we were making the Royal River crossing. And we made the crossing at night, across some assault bridges. And we weren't under fire at that point. And we kept moving again into Germany. And found later we went to a place called Tellerat. And we had to clear a couple of little pillboxes there. One bunch of them actually all abandoned. And we had a long stretch between, this was Tellerat, the next flat area. There was, a mile or two over, there was some woods, like, distance and the other way. And it's a flat road running straight to the other town. Tree line, like a lot of European roads, farm fields on both sides. So we took off, and the second platoon had the right side of the, like, I don't know, I think it was the third had the left side of the road. We got about halfway across, and the big tank ditch, it just extended the whole way deep, and road was heavily mined. We lost several tanks there. Mostly there were Regal mines, which was a long mine, about yay long and about that wide, about that high. And you could see them. Mm-hmm. They weren't as powerful, I guess, as the Keller mine, but they were more than powerful enough to knock out a tank. And my squad was leading. I had a couple men out front, and I was coming in the platoon headquarters, Lieutenant Albanese, and the rest of my people behind. And we hit that tank ditch, and that's where they stopped us. We were getting small arms fire. We were getting mortar fire. We were getting 88 fire. And I know before I got to the tank ditch, as we hit the ground, we were down. And I knew I had a couple people on the other side of the tank ditch. And our tanks started coming up. I remember I could just see the mine laying there. I was trying to wave them off from it. And I waved him off that one, but he ran into another one. It didn't make a difference. But finally we got up to the ditch. I understand that later I was told that Germans had quite a few 88s, anti-aircraft emplacements in that town. But the 88 were almost dual purpose, and they just leveled them down. They were in fixed positions, and they just swept that area. And it was just flat like a pool table. So we were getting pretty heavy casualties. That's where I lost, I guess the first man I ever lost was there. A kid named John Daniels. And 88 got by the head. And I had another one, a kid named Scipio. They were some of my new people. And I knew I had a couple people up front yet. So I crawled on up ahead. Lieutenant Albanese had come up and set himself up in a tank ditch. And we had one of our other squads come up over in the tank ditch. So that's just spread out way back. And I went on up, and my two people were holed up in a pillbox machine gun nest. small earth there. They were okay. And I came back to report to Lieutenant Albanese, and wham, they dropped around in the tank ditch. And that kind of did me in. So, from there, I left the company. You see in MASH, helicopters taking people back. Well, then, it was a slow process because medics got to me within 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And they put rifle splints on both my legs.
You knew how badly you'd been hurt.
They knew I'd been hit in the back. I had 6 in the back and both legs. And they put rifle splints on my legs. And I guess they gave me some morphine. I don't know. But we couldn't get anything up the road. And finally, toward mid-afternoon, they got me over to the other side of the road. And then they put me on an overcoat, improvised stretcher, and they got me partway back to where we could get a aid jeep up. And took me back to the aid station, battalion. And there we were thrown into ambulances. And about that dark that evening, got back to it. There was evacuation hospitals. I guess they did mobile army surgical type hospital. And I remember it was quite a surprise because it was dark by the time I got back. And it was like I'd been hit mid-morning. But they were using German prisoners as stretcher bearers. The first thing I know is here, the ambulance doors open, and German uniforms, hauling out the stretcher. But since I was tense, they just put the stretcher on sawhorses, and that was surgeons got to you, which was sometime late that night. And then the next morning, waking up, I'd been operating on it. You were GI nurses trying to, give you something to drink or a cigarette or something, trying to be helpful and manage it. They loaded us on a hospital train. And that was kind of an uncomfortable trip. And I can't even tell you how long it took. Maybe it took a day, because we got back into Paris in the morning. And I don't remember what day. I remember the day I got hit was payday. So it may have been 2 days later. And we were taken in ambulances, and I was taken to a 94th General Hospital, which was a converted school building at Pont St. Cloud in Paris.
You'd wanted to get to Paris, I imagine, but not that way.
Well, I hadn't had much thoughts to get to Paris at that point, but anyhow, that's where I ended up. And the evacuation policy at that time was, I think, 60 days. And if they couldn't get you back in 60 days, I don't know if you went to England or you went on back to the States. But anyhow, they thought they'd get me back in 60 days. Proved false. But, the wards were most all people there wasn't anybody from my own unit. I ran a whole bunch of people from other units, and they were all great people. Some of them did pretty bad, some of them, were relatively minor. And they performed more surgery there. And, I always admired because the surgeons were good. And it was just I've been last year was operating on the hospital, so a surgical suite. Here we were, it's a big room, tremendous big room, it's the operating room, and I don't know how many tables, and how many surgeons working. We were just kind of mass production, but it was an all-day affair anyhow for me. I didn't come to until sometime that night. I'd been in the operating room quite a while into this day. And the nurses, it's hard to say today, but, those gals would work 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week. They got 1 day off every 2 weeks. But they were just great, and we had French gals that worked as kind of attendants and aides and brought food, cleaned and stuff. So nurses were really just doing professional work. But they were really great, and even on their day off, a lot of them would come back to the hospital, take patients down, and they had a kind of a day room center or something to talk to, keep them out. I guess they didn't have that. They wouldn't pay us. We get $5 a month in the hospital because none of our records were there or anything else. No. And I was there for 3 months, I guess, before they did that. And it was kind of wild. We had some characters in at least the ward I was in. And, the threat back there is someone goofed up back to crash. They're going to send them up to the infantry. Well, all but one person in the ward I was in was from the infantry. And we all wanted to go back to our units. So they didn't give a damn what they did. So it got pretty wild. We had a sergeant there, a Polish name, I can't remember. Old regular, 16th infantry. He'd been wounded 7 times in North Africa. He just couldn't wait to get back to 16th. That was home. And I say with all the others, the same thing. Try to get back to the unit. And as it dragged on and dragged on. One other thing I really can remember there, when I was in recruit training, Benning, we had a retreat parade every night. Now, we trained all day long, dirty field uniform. Come in hot and sweating, had like 20 minutes to get the class A uniform for retreat parade, battalion. Sometimes they had canned music, sometimes they had a band. Parade, regular retreat parade, and back, and then we'd have mess. We didn't do much of that later on, particularly in the 7th. All those parades and ceremonies kind of went. We had some once in a while, but they went by the wayside. But after I was in the hospital, I noticed every night they'd sound retreat and had a flagpole someplace. I couldn't wait to be able to get up and walk to go see retreat. That was a big thing. I looked forward to that. Eventually, you got loads of cigarettes. Gee, I guess every union was donating them, and they'd come through. Of course, everything was rationed. But in a hospital, one day someone would come through and hand you 1 or 2 cartons of cigarettes, compliments of this union or this company or something else. And that was, in the absence of money, that was handy trading material for cognac or anything else. But eventually I got up and could get around. And I got out a couple of times into Paris, and they had sightseeing buses ran out of the hospital. And there was a friend from home. Well, I didn't know him previously, but we attended the same church, and he was stationed at Orley Field. And his wife had written to him that I was in the hospital in Paris. She found out from my folks where I was. So on one of his days off, he come over, and he took me out around Paris, showed me the sights and everything. I mean, Air Force. I guess I was operating on once or twice more during the period, but we would keep following the news of the war each day. And, it's rapid winding down, and eventually it was VE Day. The place went wild. Now I'm still in the hospital. But we started getting worried because we all wanted to go back to our units. And, it's just it's like going home.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone you knew, all your friends, they were there. And just dread the thought of going into a replacement depot and going off someplace else. So in fact, one leg was still all bandaged up, and I talked to the doctor and he let me out. I got to the replacement depot, and I caught hell there because you weren't supposed to be still bandaged up when you got to the replacement depot. And we got a train going deep in Europe to where we thought the unit was. Got to another replacement depot and ran into a truck from the outfit. So just jumped back and ended up joining the company back in St. Andrews.
Were there still quite a few people you remembered in the company when you got back?
Surprisingly, yes.
You'd taken most of your losses up
It
to that
seemed
time.
that, we lost people, the old outfit, the original outfit that went in. Most of them, good or high percentage, had all been wounded. And except for those that were killed, they all come back.
Uh-huh.
Missing were more the ones we got in, like my replacements when I got there. There were fewer of them left, but more of the old guys were all back. Mo was back, Pappy was back, Jim Ragsdale was back, Almeida was back. Because Al hadn't been hit. Smitty, my driver, was still there. So, yes, there was a big bunch of the old group still there.
It was good to be back.
So, it was just like going home. And people, we just made an effort. That's where we wanted to be at. Well, we were in St. Andreasburg just a short time. And there was still that was, I think in history, they'll talk about this redoubt area that the fanatical Nazis were to occupy, and you had the Hitler Jugend and the diehards, and werewolves, I think was another thing. And they were supposed to all kind of congregate in the rocky mountainous area, and that was a last stronghold. So they were running patrols out of there and pick up some, and we'd get shot at. There'd be on the mountainous roads going from unit to unit, and were decapitating wires and things of this nature. But right after I joined them in St. Andreasburg, we pulled out to Pilsen, Czechoslovakia. We took over from now the division of Pilsen. And we were building Chateau Analyses, abandoned. And we were pulling guard mostly in Pilsen. We had another company in Pilsen. There was a big, in the center, the town, what do they call it? Europe, I can't remember. Right in the center, heart of town. There was a big quadrangle thing, and that was a prison. One of our companies was there. There was an SS camp out of the town, and there was another company there. Our company, we were building analyses, and we had a DP camp called Camp Boring. We had a military hospital. We had a few people at. We had another one we called the Hunky Camp, and this was a Hungarian cavalry regiment with their families, horse unit, and they were kind of disbanded there. So we had a few people over there, and then we had a prison camp further out the road. No barbed wire, no nothing. It was just a collection of. Now the other prison camp was SS. This was just standard Wehrmacht troops. A couple officers ran the camp, and we had a couple of the DP camp, and there we had a couple of GIs, they were privates and corporals who spoke either Polish or German, kind of like as interpreters. And so that's where we spent all our time. Yeah, we move in and out from analyses. We spend a couple of days in camp. Then we'd go out on a guard detail, one of these places. Most of the time, second platoon hit Camp Bory, the Hunky Camp, and the prison. That's the ones we rotated. We pulled German prisoners, and we had all of our vehicles, they were shiny. And all of our weapons had been refurbished and in great shape. They worked the kitchen. We had barbers. You didn't, if you were going out on guard duty, it was just like, if you've seen pictures of the Indian Army, the bear room. My gosh, Sergeant, you got the guard detail at Boring. One out and take over 12 o'clock and call up the prisons, and they'd haul up all your gear, and you just stroll out leisurely and haul your gear.
Good way to be in the Army.
And we spent several months there. And of course, it was, again, most of the old months that we went. we started losing some people. Then rotation, of course, we caught hell a few times as usual, but we were in General Patton's area, and that meant ties, being real spiffy. But things went along pretty well. We had our people that gotten all kinds of scrapes in town, and we got some scrapes for the burgomeister here, but that was typical of the company because I don't remember. I think some of those guys would walk a mile to get in a fight. It was just that kind. And it wasn't a bad kind of occupation. And I guess about that time I got to leave 7 days R&R down in East. That was when the EJ day came up while I was on the train. We came back. They started breaking up the outfit. Took them back in September. And some of the low point men were being pulled out to go to the Pacific. Before they'd started before EJ, and they were en route. And then bit by bit, we bring in people from other divisions at high points. And finally, I guess it was late September, I didn't have enough points, so I went to the 331st Regiment D Company, which was a heavy weapons company, and was put in as a platoon sergeant. And eventually the 8th went on back. Now in that time, we had a couple of first sergeants, a couple of company commanders. We lost Benny Mark, the first sergeant one time, but he wasn't the first sergeant then. I can't remember who was. And Captain Towers was our company commander. Lieutenant Hammerschmidt had been killed where I was hit. And we went through a couple of company commanders, and Captain Towers happened to have been the outfit we relieved in many. One of the officers in the 94th. But it was kind of, because we're glad to see people have the chance to come home, particularly those who are married, like Bill, wife, we all knew about the twins. I'd heard about it for years. I met Sharon last night, the first time, and I knew who it was. That's all it could be.
Yeah, those are Bill's twins.
Yeah, because I'd heard about them for years and years, all the time. Correspondence over the years. And we were glad to see them, get a chance to come home, but yet we were sorry to break up. And this is just a side, I say it was a very personal